The question I ask is this: where are black people in this country going? And in particular, where is the African Caribbean community going? You see, I've lived in Leicester for the most part of my life, and I've witnessed the changes that have taken place in the African Caribbean community here in Leicester. And I have to say, it's left me feeling very pessimistic about the future for the African Caribbean community here in Leicester. And perhaps my deeper fear is that what's happening here in Leicester is symptomatic of what is happening to our communities up and down the country. Now let me give you an insight into my concerns here in Leicester. See, back in the 60s and 70s, a large proportion of the black community lived in the Highfields area of the city. And as a consequence, we had a strong community, a tight community. And when we spoke, the local politicians listened and responded to us. And as a consequence, we established ourselves here in the city and made inroad into the well-being of Leicester and Leicester wider community. But you know, with the passage of time, our power structure in the city began to diminish. And in my opinion, there were three reasons why the power structure diminished. The first one is this: there were members in our community who were doing well for themselves and decided that the Highfields no longer reflected their aspiration. And so they left the Highfields area and went to live in other parts of Leicester that they felt reflected their new status better. The second reason is perhaps a touch more sinister, and this one was perpetrated by the local authorities. By a process of stealth, the council systematically moved a large proportion of the black community out of the Highfields and placed them elsewhere in the city. And the third reason is this: there was a community that existed outside of the country that had identified Leicester as the city they were going to move into, and they had earmarked the Highfields as the area that they were going to take up residence. Now, this community was very aggressive in the pursuit of their agenda. Now, with the demise of the power base of the African Caribbean community and the more able members in our community turning their energies elsewhere, it meant that the African Caribbean community here in Leicester was exposed to the whims of the council and the aspirations of other communities. Now, let me make it absolutely and perfectly clear at this point: I'm not blaming the council for what has happened to us, neither am I blaming any other community for what has happened to us. But the facts are that we were no longer a priority in the eyes of the council. We were no longer perceived as a credible threat, either economically or politically, in the council. And to be honest, if we wanted to rally behind a cause here in Leicester, while we might have the appetite for it, the power base was simply not there to support it. So when our community centre disappeared, when the part that we regarded as our own disappeared, when our bookshops became grocery store, there was very little we could do to resist it, because we didn't have the structures in our community that would have helped us to stave off what was happening to us. And when the City Council decided that they wanted the building that the Leicester United Caribbean Association was using as their headquarters, when the City Council decided they wanted to knock that building down and build a theatre in its place, not a single person in our community batted an eyelid. In fact, some people were pleased to see the back of Luca. Some people were saying good riddance to Luca. But you see, they were missing the point. And the point is, as these things disappeared, so too were our heritage. So too were the hard work that went into establishing our community here in Leicester. And as our heritage disappeared, we, the African Caribbean community were becoming more and more invisible and less relevant to the city. So we, as we were disappearing off the radar of the City Council and off the map of other agencies, the only time we were relevant to other communities here in the city is when we spend our hard-earned monies in their businesses at weekends and every first Saturday in August when we had our carnival. For the rest of the time, we were irrelevant, we are irrelevant, we are invisible here in Leicester. Now, if my analysis of the situation of the black community here in Leicester is correct, then the obvious question is this: what are we going to do about it? Now, don't get me wrong here. We can't look to the council, we can't look to other communities to solve this problem. This is a problem we have got to look to each other to solve ourselves. And don't misunderstand me. I do know that community isn't about a geographical location in the city. Community goes well beyond that, because it's not our feet that decides our community. It's what's going on inside our heads that decides our community. If we are to re-establish ourselves in this city, what are we going to do to achieve that? So I ask the question again. Where are black people in this country going? And I leave you with a thought that has been going around in my head for many months, for many years. If the black people in this country and the Asian community that came here in mass well after the black community, if they decided today that they were going to pick up sticks and leave the country, which do you think would have the greater impact on the economic and political infrastructure of this country? Now, there's a thought. Thank you for listening.